I used to think Christmas morning was the safest time of year. Nobody yells, nobody fights. Everything is soft, quiet, and pretend happy. The kind of quiet where people smile even if they don't mean it. That's why it hurt more when my own kids stood in front of me, coats already on, and told me I needed to leave. It was just after 8. The coffee was still hot. The tree lights were on. I could hear a neighbor's radio playing carols through the wall. My daughter wouldn't look at me. My son did all the talking. "Dad, this isn't working anymore." No yelling, no anger, just rehearsed calm, like they'd practiced it together. I remember thinking, this is what being replaced sounds like. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. Pride does strange things when it's cornered. I grabbed my jacket, stepped outside, and felt the cold hit harder than it should have. I sat in my car and watched the house through the windshield. My house, the one I'd paid off years ago, the one with my name on every memory inside. I didn't know then that the clock had already started. If you've ever had someone take something from you and act like it was already theirs, you'll understand why this still stays with me. And if you're listening to this right now, stick with me, because what happened at 9 o'clock changed everything. The thing about betrayal is that it rarely comes as a surprise. Looking back, the signs were everywhere. Shorter calls, conversations that stopped when I walked into a room, decisions being made without me, then explained after the fact like I was a child who wouldn't understand anyway. My wife passed 3 years before all this, cancer, fast and unforgiving. After the funeral, something shifted. The house went quiet in a different way, not peaceful, strategic. At first I told myself it was grief, then it became control. They talked about downsizing, about what made sense going forward. They said things like, "You don't really need all this space anymore," as if my life had already been reduced to square footage. I stayed because it was easier than fighting my own kids. I paid the bills, fixed the leaks, put up the lights every December like I always had. I told myself families bend, but don't break. Christmas morning proved me wrong. When they locked the door behind me, it wasn't anger I felt. It was something colder. The realization that they'd already divided my life up in their heads. What they didn't know was that my wife had never trusted easy smiles or rushed decisions. She believed in timing, in safeguards, in making sure love couldn't be rewritten later. The document was signed years ago, filed properly, reviewed twice, and buried inside it was a clause no one remembered. At exactly 9 o'clock that morning, ownership didn't just change hands. Authority did. I was still sitting in my car when my phone buzzed. The call came from a number I hadn't saved, but I recognized the area code immediately. Downtown, legal offices. I almost let it ring out. Pride again. That same stupid instinct telling me not to look like I was waiting for rescue. I answered on the last buzz. "Mr. Thompson," a calm voice said. "This is Elaine Parker. I'm calling regarding the transfer scheduled for this morning." I looked at the clock on my dashboard. 8:54 a.m. "Yes," I said. My voice didn't shake, but my hand did. "I'm available."
"Good," she replied. "I just wanted to confirm you're aware that the conditions were met at 8:47.
I watched my front door from across the street. My son's shadow moved past the window, probably pouring himself coffee, using my mug. "I'm aware," I said. "Is everything in order?" "Everything is finalized," she said. "At 9 sharp, the filings go through. You'll receive confirmation by email and certified notice will be delivered to the residence." The residence. She didn't say my house. She didn't say their house. Just the residence. Neutral, clean, legal. I thanked her and ended the call. For the first time since stepping outside, I smiled. My wife used to say timing was everything. She said people reveal who they are when they think the clock is on their side. We'd set this up years ago after her diagnosis, but before things got bad. She'd been clear-headed, sharp, angry too, though she hid it well. "Promise me something," she'd said, sitting at the kitchen table with papers spread out like a game board. "Promise me you won't tell them about this." I'd hesitated. They were our kids. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand, harder than she ever had before. "They love you," she said, "but love gets complicated when people start counting." The clause was simple, but precise. A delayed transfer tied to behavior, not time alone. A safeguard against exactly what was happening now. If I was removed from the home, formally or informally, before the 5-year mark, authority reverted. Assets froze. Control shifted back to me, permanently. No appeals, no loopholes. At 9 a.m., that clock ran out. I checked my phone again. 8:59. The front door opened. My daughter stepped out, phone pressed to her ear. She looked annoyed, confused. She paced on the porch, shaking her head. I watched her try the door again, like it might suddenly listen to her. My email buzzed. Subject line, confirmation of transfer completion. I didn't open it yet. I didn't need to. Another minute passed, then another call. This one from my son. I let it ring. He called again. I answered. "What did you do?" he demanded. I stayed quiet. Let the silence stretch. Let him fill it with panic. "Dad," he said, softer now. "Something's wrong. The bank just froze the account. The lawyer's office is saying you're the one in charge again. That can't be right." I looked at the house, Christmas decorations glowing in the windows, the tree still blinking like nothing had changed. "Oh," I said, "that—" "What clause?" he snapped. "What did you sign?" "Your mother handled most of it," I said. "I just listened." He swore under his breath. "You can't do this," he said. "We had plans." I almost laughed. Plans. Like I was an obstacle they'd already moved around. "You already did it to me," I said. "This is just the paperwork catching up." I hung up. I didn't go back inside right away. I drove. No destination, just movement. I parked near the park where we used to take the kids when they were small. Snow dusted the benches. Empty swings creaked in the wind. Another email came in, then another. The house account, the trust, the legal authority notice. Everything was clean, surgical. By the time I drove back, the police were there. Not for me, for confusion. A noise complaint, maybe. Or a welfare check. Someone had panicked. I parked down the street and watched. My daughter stood on the porch, arms crossed, face tight. My son paced the driveway, phone glued to his ear. A courier pulled up behind me, got out, walked straight past my car with a thick envelope. He rang the bell. The officer waited while my son opened the door. Papers were handed over, signatures collected. My son's shoulders slumped. I got out of the car and walked up the driveway. No one noticed me at first. Then my daughter turned. "Dad," she said, like the word tasted wrong. "You need to leave. This is getting complicated." I held up my phone, opened the email, showed her the subject line. Her eyes moved, read, stopped. She looked at my son. He didn't need to see it. He already knew. "You locked me out," I said calmly. That satisfied the condition. The officer cleared his throat. "Sir," he said to my son, "according to these documents, your father is the legal authority here." My son stared at me. Anger, then fear, then something close to shame flickered across his face. "This was supposed to be temporary," he said. "We just needed space." "You changed the locks," I replied, "on Christmas morning." Silence settled in, heavy, final. The officer nodded once and stepped back. "Let us know if you need assistance," he said to me. I didn't. I walked past them and into the house. It smelled like coffee and pine and something burned. A forgotten pastry in the oven, maybe. The tree lights blinked on and off. Behind me, I heard my kids arguing in low voices, trying to decide what to do next. I took off my coat, hung it where it always went. The clock on the wall ticked past 9:20. Christmas morning wasn't over yet. "They didn't leave right away." That surprised me more than anything else. I expected shouting, slammed doors, maybe threats about lawyers and courts. Instead, they hovered. My daughter sat at the edge of the couch like she was waiting to be dismissed from a meeting. My son paced from the kitchen to the hallway, running his hands through his hair, stopping every few steps to check his phone. I poured myself coffee, fresh, strong, the way I liked it. No one offered, no one spoke. The power shift had happened, but the room hadn't caught up yet. "Dad," my daughter finally said, careful, measured. "We need to talk about what happens next." I leaned against the counter and waited. Let her feel the weight of having to continue. "This doesn't have to get ugly," she added. I almost smiled at that. Almost. "Christmas already did that," I said. My son stopped pacing. "You're acting like this was some kind of ambush," he said. "We were trying to help." I looked at him, really looked. He had my eyes, my wife's stubborn jaw. I remembered teaching him how to ride a bike, holding the seat too long because I didn't want him to fall. "Help usually doesn't involve locks," I said. Silence again. They tried a different approach after that. Softer voices, regret-adjacent words. My daughter talked about stress. My son talked about finances. They said things like miscommunication and rushed decisions. They didn't say sorry. I let them talk themselves tired. By late morning, relatives started calling. Word travels fast when something doesn't go according to plan. My sister called first, then my wife's cousin. Then someone from church who hadn't checked in for years but suddenly felt concerned. I didn't explain. I just said everything was being handled. Around noon, my son asked if they could stay until after lunch. I said yes, not out of kindness, out of clarity. I wanted them to sit in it, to feel what it was like to be unsure in a place they thought they owned. They ate quietly, no laughter, no Christmas music. The holiday kept going around us, like we were standing still while everyone else moved on. After lunch, my daughter finally asked the question they'd both been circling. "So, what are you going to do now?" I didn't answer right away. I walked to the hallway closet and opened it, pulled out a small lockbox, set it on the table. Their eyes followed it. "I'm going to finish what your mother started," I said. I opened the box. Inside were copies, deeds, account summaries, letters, sealed but labeled. My daughter reached for one. "Don't," I said. She stopped. She anticipated this, I continued. Not this exact morning, but the possibility. My son swallowed. "Anticipated what?" "That you'd decide I was easier to manage once I was out of the way." That landed. They didn't interrupt after that. "The trust was never about money," I said. "It was about responsibility. She wanted to see how you'd treat me when you thought I had nothing left to offer." My daughter's voice cracked. "That's not fair." "Neither was Christmas morning," I replied. I slid one envelope toward them. "Read it," I said out loud. They hesitated, then my son opened it. He read slowly. His face changed with every paragraph. Not shock, recognition. It was my wife's handwriting, clear, unmistakable. She talked about love, about fear, about how people can confuse entitlement with care, about how she'd seen it happen in other families and refused to let it happen in ours without safeguards. By the time he finished, my daughter was crying. Quietly, controlled, the way she always cried when she didn't want to look weak. "She thought this would happen?" she asked. "She worried it might," I said. That was enough. They sat there for a long time after that. Eventually my son stood. "We should go," he said. I nodded. At the door, my daughter turned back. "Are you kicking us out?" she asked. I considered it. Christmas irony and all. "No," I said. "You're leaving because you need to." They left without another word. The house went quiet again, but this time it felt earned. I spent the afternoon making calls, not angry calls, administrative ones. Lawyers, banks, the accountant who'd stayed neutral all these years and suddenly sounded relieved. By evening, everything was aligned. I ordered takeout, ate at the table alone, left the lights off except for the tree. I thought about calling them, about checking in. I didn't. They needed time, and so did I. That night, I slept in my bed for the first time in weeks without feeling like a guest. The next few days were a blur of paperwork and distance. They didn't come by, they didn't call. Instead, messages started arriving, carefully worded. Apologies wrapped in explanations, requests framed as conversations. I answered when necessary, briefly, clearly. A week later, my lawyer called with an update. They're considering contesting, she said. Emotionally driven, weak grounds. I thanked her. I wasn't worried, because the truth had already done its work. The betrayal wasn't just legal, it was personal, and that doesn't disappear just because someone regrets the timing. On New Year's Eve, my daughter called. I just wanted to say, she began, we didn't mean to hurt you. I let that sit. Intent doesn't erase impact, I said. I know, she replied. I hope someday. Maybe, I said, but not yet. I hung up gently. The house stayed mine, not because of clauses or conditions, because I finally stopped handing it over piece by piece. Christmas morning had taken something from me, but it also gave me something back. Clarity. January changed the tone of everything. Christmas had been emotional, loud in its own quiet way. January was procedural, cold, full of calendars, deadlines, and people who suddenly wanted meetings they should have asked for years ago. My kids didn't contest the will right away. Instead, they circled, tried to regain footing. First came the polite emails, then the suggestions, then the pressure. My son asked if we could restructure responsibilities. My daughter suggested mediation. They both used the same word more than once. Fair. Fair is a word people reach for when leverage disappears. I didn't shut them out completely. That wasn't the point. I agreed to one meeting, neutral location, lawyer present, no emotions on the table. They arrived together, which told me everything I needed to know. United front, rehearsed positions. They looked tired, not guilty. Tired. We sat. Coffee was poured. Papers were arranged. My daughter spoke first. We want to rebuild trust. I nodded. Then start by being honest. She glanced at my son. He took over. We thought you'd be safer with less responsibility, he said. We thought this was the best way forward. For who? I asked. He hesitated. That half-second pause mattered. For everyone, he said finally. The lawyer cleared her throat, redirected the conversation to logistics. They proposed living arrangements, budgets, timelines, roles. At no point did either of them say we were wrong. That was the moment I knew this wasn't finished. I let them talk, took notes, asked questions that sounded cooperative but weren't. What happens if I disagree? What happens if I change my mind? What happens if one of you decides I'm inconvenient again? The answers were vague, conditional, hopeful. When it was my turn, I slid a single page across the table. It was a revised directive, clean, legal, simple. I'd spent the last week putting it together with my lawyer. From now on, all decisions regarding assets, property, and distributions required unanimous consent, mine included. And if that consent was violated even once, everything reverted into a locked trust controlled by an independent third party. No family access, no exceptions. They stared at it. This is extreme, my son said. No, I replied. This is informed. My daughter looked hurt. You don't trust us. I met her eyes. You taught me not to. The meeting ended without agreement. That night I sat in the living room and watched the snow come down outside the same window my wife used to sit by. I thought about how calm she always seemed when she'd already made peace with something hard. I signed the directive the next morning. The fallout wasn't dramatic. It was quieter than that. They stopped calling, stopped emailing. Instead, I heard things through other people. That I was stubborn, that I was being vindictive, that grief had made me paranoid. I didn't correct anyone. Let them tell the story they needed. In February, the house needed repairs. Real ones, roof issues, old plumbing. The kind of maintenance that proves ownership more than any document. I hired people myself, paid invoices myself, made decisions without consulting anyone. It felt grounding, ordinary, mine. One afternoon, my granddaughter came by with my daughter, no warning. No agenda, at least not an obvious one. She ran inside like nothing had happened, wrapped her arms around my legs and asked why the tree was gone. I lifted her up, told her Christmas had passed. My daughter stood awkwardly by the door. "She wanted to see you," she said. "I'm glad," I replied. We sat, talked about school, about nothing important, about everything that was. Before they left, my daughter lingered. "I don't know how to fix this," she said quietly. I considered her words. "You don't fix it," I said. "You live differently going forward." She nodded, but I could tell she wanted absolution, not instruction. Spring came early that year, or maybe I just noticed it more. I started walking again, cooking properly, sleeping without the tightness in my chest that had been there since my wife died. Control does that. It settles you. In March, my son finally called. "I messed up," he said. "No qualifiers, no excuses." I listened. "I thought I was protecting everyone," he continued, "but I was really protecting myself." That was closer to truth than anything I'd heard so far. "I don't expect forgiveness," he added. "I just wanted you to hear it." "I do," I said. We didn't reconcile, not yet, but something shifted. By summer, the house felt like a home again. Not a contested space, not a symbol, just a place where I lived. I hosted one small dinner. Friends, not family. Laughter without tension. At the end of the night, I stood alone in the kitchen and realized something important. The revenge everyone expected from me never came. There were no dramatic expulsions, no public shaming, no scorched earth. Just boundaries, consequences, permanence. And that, I realized, was harder for them to live with than anger would have been. Christmas morning had been about taking. The months after were about reclaiming. And I wasn't finished yet. By the time the next Christmas rolled around, the house looked the same from the outside. Lights on the roof, wreath on the door, snow settling into corners like it always did. But inside everything was different. There was no tension humming under the floorboards, no quiet negotiations happening behind closed doors, no sense that I was living on borrowed time. I woke up early that morning, not because of nerves, but because I wanted to, made coffee, sat at the table, let the silence exist without trying to fill it. I didn't invite my kids over. That wasn't revenge, it was clarity. They sent messages instead, short ones, careful ones. "Merry Christmas, Dad. Hope you're doing well today. Thinking of you." I replied to each, polite, warm, measured. Boundaries don't have to be cold to be firm. Around mid-morning, I went for a walk. Same neighborhood, same houses, different posture. I realized something then. For years, I'd been shrinking myself to keep the peace, making room for decisions that weren't mine, accepting disrespect because it was easier than conflict. Christmas morning had forced that pattern into the light. People ask me now if I regret how things turned out. I don't. Regret belongs to people who ignore warning signs. I paid attention when it mattered. Later that day, I opened the last envelope from the lockbox, the one I hadn't touched yet. It was another letter from my wife, shorter than the others. She wrote about endings, about how love doesn't mean unlimited access, about how protecting someone sometimes means standing your ground instead of stepping aside. At the bottom, she'd written one line that stayed with me. "If they truly care, they'll learn to meet you where you stand." I folded the letter and put it back. In the afternoon, my daughter called, just to talk, no agenda, no requests. We spoke about ordinary things, weather, her daughter's school, a recipe she'd messed up. Before hanging up, she said, "I'm proud of you." I didn't rush to respond. "Thank you," I said. "That means something now." The trust remained locked the way I'd structured it. Not out of spite, but out of respect for the lesson it carried. They would inherit one day, just not control me along the way. That night I sat by the window where my wife used to sit and watch the snow fall again. Same view, different man. Losing your footing teaches you where you actually stand. Getting kicked out on Christmas morning hurt. I won't pretend it didn't. But it also stripped away the illusion that love survives without accountability. I didn't win because of a clause or a clock or a lawyer. I won because I stopped apologizing for existing in my own life. If this story hit close to home for you, if you've ever been made to feel like a guest in the life you built, stay with this channel, subscribe, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Because sometimes justice isn't loud. Sometimes it happens quietly, right on time. And in the next story, the betrayal won't come from children. It'll come from the one person who promised never to leave.